And welcome back to the Ascension Playground. This is your friend Ursie. And yes, I'm back now to talk about the second major arcana card, number 1, because the first card is number 0, the Fool. And this card today we're talking about is the Magician, to see if there's any galactic star connections to these amazingly deep and powerful archetypal energies held in the tarot. So we started with the Fool at the top of the chart. And as the new soul enters into the third dimension or density, we find that the hero's journey begins with a period of descension before then it can move upward into ascension, only to just start all over again. So what's come up for me is I have a pretty good library of all things esoteric. And while I was considering the energy of the Fool, the Magician, and the High Priestess, that triad of the three, because I couldn't really just keep it singularly anymore, the idea of the book of Genesis came forward. And if you can see this idea of Genesis or Gene Isis, right? So we see Isis flanked by the two angels sitting on top of the Ark of the Covenant. So we do go back into our ancient origin stories to understand where are we and then where are we going. So without further ado, let's go take a look at the Magician in its relationship to the Fool and the High Priestess. So let's see. It's just interesting as I watch myself needing deeper, longer breaks in between as I tune in and basically help bring forward information and play with it. So my mind, my ego is a little bit, oh, wait till it's all together. But instead, on the playground, I'm just trying to say, let's just see what comes up. Don't worry about being right or wrong. It's all about energy and cosmic portraiture. So, who we are as an individual, but also as a collective in humanity. So, let's go see tracking the possible galactic connections as it relates to the tarot. And again, tarot is this picture book of wisdom that was left in plain sight so we could help understand and navigate our way during our human journey. All right, so here we go. I'm just going to go right in. The first thing that came up for me was this idea of the Magician, to see if there's a link into the Sirius star constellation, or excuse me, the Sirius star system that sits in the constellation of Canis Major, the big dog. This is the big dog constellation of Orion, the hunter. So Sirius, that star, Sirius A, is the brightest star of the heavens. And so I thought, okay, well, let's just go and see what's going on with Sirius. This Egyptian image of Amenhotep came forward, wanting to be seen. This is the one that, after all the dynasties in Egypt, who said, wait, there's only one God, not all these deities. And so he was talking about Ra, the universal one. And unfortunately, I don't think he made it through his dynasty, was killed, and tried to be erased out of the Egyptian history. But this is the system, the star system, that came forward when I was thinking about the Magician. So, opening this book of wisdom, the tarot, we call in the idea of show us, tell us, what is the story or one of the stories with the Magician? And I just want to share this with you in case you hadn't seen my previous little YouTube videos. This is Theresa Bullard. And if you have a chance, go on to GaiaTV and check out her modern mystery school as it relates to the tarot. She's seeing it not as, okay, let's predict and use as a divinatory process for understanding yes, no answers, but instead to look at it more from an alchemical lens of the 22 multidimensional lives that each of us take on, whether it's here on Earth or some on Earth and some on other star systems, to start embracing the tarot as more of a show us what we can learn from a galactic lens. And here I've placed, here's the new soul coming in as the fool, and then now we're going to move to the magician, which is taking this idea of we began with the fool, the center one is the magician, followed by the high priestess. So here's the little young soul coming in as the new beginning. Yes, the fool as an archetype, but landing with the magician. And so when we talked about the magician, we see the singular looking male outwardly expressing energy with the infinity symbol of energy above the head. But what does it mean to be bookended by the fool and the high priestess? So it's not just looking at the card, but how it sits in this hero's journey. It's something that intrigues me. So I started looking back at Lisa Royal Holt's book on the Prism of Lyra. And in it, when she starts talking about the source wanting to know itself and expand, moving into the first level of the founders, and the founders holding this blueprint for creation. But right after the founders, they moved into the Lyra constellation, or what we call the Lyra system, like the beginning of what we call our creation story. But in it, when you start looking at Lyra, we see that this idea of the negative with the positive energetics, right? So the outward male, which we could also read as the magician, the one trying to create out in the world. And its opposite and equal is the high priestess, one who finds all answers within. So the male going outward, the feminine coming inward. We see, according to Lisa Royal Holt's Prism of Lyra, that positive negative pole is only to help bring the duality into what's called an apex. So this started me thinking like, that idea of how does the fool work with the high priestess and the magician? So I wish I could be very linear here and just stay in my lane and just talk about the magician, but I couldn't help but start seeing this idea of, oh, there you've got the positive, the negative, and then the apex point, forming a rather trinity, right? What we learned in our collective for most of the world is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So what about the feminine, right? Was that the Holy Spirit? In the center, I've placed a yin yang to the idea of if all of this is about coming into balance with the duality of black and white, taking off that judgment layer of who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's evil, and just getting to a higher view of what's it really been about energetically, archetypally. And does this story play out within the tarot? So the fool beginning the journey, almost like the divine child, held in balance between the masculine, let's just say the magician, and the feminine, the high priestess. So male, female, and divine child. Then I went to look at, okay, that said, what are the solar system planetary glyphs? What's the energy working with the fool? It is Uranus. And so if you go back and look at my YouTube around the fool, this idea of the Uranian energy carried with that tarot card. This is the most galactic, quick, sudden downloads. It's like suddenly the divine child arrives, the new birth, the soul coming in. But then look at what's balancing it. We've got Mercury and the moon. It's not Mars and Venus, male and female on a pedestrian, mundane level, but instead it's the moon and Mercury. And now, Mercury, if you recall, is the only metaphoric god of communication and commerce that can go into all of the realms, the upper realms, the middle earth, and then the lower realms. Communication is being associated with the external male archetype of the magician, whereas the moon energy, that which is reflective light, it doesn't have its own light. It reflects the light of the sun, and it changes and has its cycles through the calendar days, the months, the years, right? Waxing and waning, full moon, new moon. It's being held by the receptive feminine energy of the high priestess. All right, see, we're into tarot. And just to put this one image together of the quintessence of Uranus, let's say, as that sudden divine child being born, being kept together with this trinity of Mercury and the moon. All right, so communications outward and manifestations outward, magic outward into the mundane world. Whereas the moon, let me go in and reflect. Let me go behind and go within to find my answers. All for this beautiful archetypal balancing act of integration. And with Lisa Royal Holt, the apex, the Uranus aspect, let's say in this case, is all about this integration of the two energies held in opposite. Here now, I'm making a leap because this is what came through. Again, as I mentioned, this book, Genesis, the first book of Revelations, started to feel into the masculine star story of Osiris, with his opposite and equal, Isis, and then together forming the divine child, Horus. Whenever I see the word Horus, I can't help but flip the letters around and see the word hours, like time, linearity, third dimension. Horus, the divine child held between Osiris and Isis. Why? To help bring in this idea of integration. Now, here's an incredible book that came up as I'm trying to focus on the magician. It's called The Sirius Mystery by Robert Temple. And if you look on Wikipedia, you can pull this information. What is it and why is it that this came forward as I'm looking at the magician, the Sirius Mystery? Well, that face, that is Amenhotep. That is the one that kept coming forward, the divine one coming in as the magician to say, hey, put away all these other gods for a minute. Let's focus on the one. Remember the dream of Ra, of unity consciousness, of we're not separate, we're together collectively. And as above, so below, so in the heavens, the whole focus with Amenhotep in Egyptian lore is Ra, the universal law of one. But this book by Robert Temple did some research on the Dogon people of Africa who are pointing to the Sirius star system as those are our forebears. That's where we are from. There's our parentage, our lineage up in Sirius. But interesting, it wasn't just the one star, it was the star system. Okay. And the interesting thing that Robert Temple researched was they're actually not pointing to Sirius A, the brightest star of the heavens, but actually to Sirius B. It's a white dwarf star that's not actually visible from Earth with our naked eye. How did they know about this Sirius B star, right? So this idea of the eye will come up in our research on Sirius B. So just to show you, here's how broad and bright Sirius A is compared to the small white dwarf star Sirius B. When you look at Bernadette, my dog Sophie is saying, yeah, when we look at Bernadette Brady and her work with the Star School, this idea of Sirius, Canis Major, the big dog. She says the A star holds the fire of immortality. This is what her research found. Imagine that, the star of immortality. But when I was focused on the magician, my eye and my thoughts went to the small little Sirius B in its connection to Amenhotep and the Dogon people. Right? So I went ahead and I put Osiris, Isis, and then Horus, the eye above, right? In this beautiful triad. And in the center now, instead of the yin yang of balancing integration, I put the solar arc. This is an Egyptian glyph that talks about the thought that upon death, the pharaohs would return back to home, the Sirius star system. So, is there a connection then between the magician, this beautiful star, Sirius, the system, and I'm going to call out Sirius B. Why not? A, B, and C. I believe A is actually related more to Isis, and that the B star connects more closely with the magician. Could be wrong. Could be another star in Lyra, but right or wrong, here we are. I wanted to share this picture now. Let me pause for a minute. So, this idea that the possibility for the magician and the energetic and highest level of what this card means, I mean, we're looking at what you focus upon, you can create, whether using earth, air, fire, water. The whole focus and principle of the magician card has been this idea of alchemy. So, when I looked to the heavens and I tuned in, it's like, wow, what archetypal reference can be matched with this card? And, it does all go back to that all seeing eye, right? Some of us might say, oh, well, that's raw. But instead, I think it's this idea of really embracing the idea that we too are fractals of all that is, of source energy, that we too, when we tune inwards and really silence our minds and tune into our heart, can and will remember that we carry that source essence with us. Yes, of the magician, working with, yes, the rose, the lily, with intelligence. If you see around the magician's inner white robe of purity and knowledge and connection to spirit, he has a belt with a snake eating its tail, another indicator of the great Ouroboros, that energy continues. It's circular. It's actually spiralic and evolutionary as well. So, this idea of, yes, holding up the wand, the double terminated wand of bringing spirit into matter, all the while channeling it down, down into this time now moment, onto earth, onto this timeline. So, look at this idea of as above, so below. Yes, the magician. Let me scroll back one just real quick. This idea of bringing in the feminine high priestess with the magician, Osiris. Wasn't it magic that Isis could wrap Osiris, all of his parts, back together again? So that is magical transmutation, transformation. And then why? This alchemical, multidimensional magic then could create the third entity, Horus, the divine child. There's so much coming in right now. I know that I'm talking about alchemical wisdom here. In fact, let me stop sharing for a moment. For those of you who really enjoy tarot and card decks, this is the one, the Thoth deck or the Toth deck. It is connected to, as we said earlier, Hermes Trismegistus, the Mercury card, the card of the magician. I shared this in the first part of the magician on my YouTube channel. So yes, Thoth. I used to be afraid of this because I thought, oh, this magic brings and calls in its equal and opposite, right? So the greatest light, the greatest shadow matches it. Let me end by saying, let's see, here we go. We thank the fool who's beginning the new journey. We then move to the magician, imagining what we can create and working with, here's another book, the raw material. It's almost like when you go back to read about what Lisa Royal Holt was saying in The Prism of Lyra, that it's this whole idea of who's carrying the vision and remembering that we all came from source. The founders are holding the dream of the blueprint that was set up in the very beginning. And then we move to Lyra. So the Orion, and then Canis Major and Sirius. So we thank the Syrian star system for playing with me today, but it's actually not just the magician, but also the high priestess and the fool. So we'll see how this goes. Let me know if you enjoy this or if you found another star system that connects more closely with what you think the archetype of the magician is carrying. I'm a storyteller at essence, but I enjoy learning and I'm open to the debate and to the point counterpoint because in the end, we're all trying to find our way back home. And I think that's what the raw material is really saying is you don't have to go anywhere. You're holding that energy and frequency. And by dreaming it back into existence, we help ourselves and the collective and Mother Earth. Thank you. And we'll see you next time on the Ascension Playground. Bye for now.